Hello and welcome to Console Cowboys. So today let's talk about readout calls and all the issues that go with those. So this is probably the most eventful call depending on your client because there's a lot of worst case scenarios that pop up during this time depending on whether the client liked your findings, didn't like your findings, wanted you to find nothing, or was upset that you didn't find anything because they were actually doing things quite well. So a lot of things pop up. Now, the first thing you should think about in this call is who your audience is, because oftentimes there might not be technical people on the call. They might not have even read your report yet. And sometimes there are super technical people on the call and they want details. So you have to understand who's going to be on this call so you know how to speak to this call and you're able to put the proper people on the call to help you out if you need some backup there. So that's the first thing to think about. Who is your audience? Because if you have completely non-tech people on this call, you need to just go over mostly the impact of what you found and a very high level description of what you found, and then explain to them, why this is bad. But this is super technical people. You're really going to need to dive into, what you found, how you found it, why it's an issue, what you did to bypass things, what are proper mitigations, and really just get more into details. It really depends who you're talking to and what they want. But first you have to find out too, did they even read this report? Because a lot of times you'll get to the call, they haven't even opened the report yet. So the best case scenario here is they read the report, they came, prepared with questions on specific findings, and you can go through all of those and really discuss the finer details of the things they had questions on. The other scenario is they haven't even opened it up yet, and you really have to go top to bottom in this report, and anything can happen in here, because if this is a client who was doing a test for PCI and they wanted you to find nothing, but you found very, very bad things, at this point, there's going to be a lot of emotions. They're going to be not happy. They're going to fight you on findings. They're going to tell you you're incorrect, or they may have noticed that you tested something that was completely out of scope because they gave you the wrong IP addresses or the wrong URLs, and they didn't even own those assets. And that's a whole nother thing that can happen right there. So this is why, you need to know your audience. You need to make sure that, let them know they should read through the report before they even hop on this call and come with questions, etc. And also prior to everything regarding scope, you need to check and double check the scope with the client just to make sure it's theirs before you even begin testing. So hopefully it doesn't come out in the actual report, but I have seen it happen before. It's one of those worst case scenario things. I think there was actually a Darknet Diaries on that one with Mubix, who tested a whole different company with a similar name and then ended up having a kick out or a close off call with that company, who was quite excited that they got a free pen test. So you can go check that out. And that's really a really bad scenario, and it could go really bad where the other company wants to sue you because you tested their stuff illegally, but then you have contracts saying you were going to test that because they gave you the wrong URLs, and it's a whole mess. Hopefully, much like Mubix's case, it comes out really good where they're happy about it, but you never know, right? So let's talk about the actual findings now. So the best case scenario is you'll go from top to bottom and go through all of the findings that they had questions on, or all of the findings if they haven't read it yet. And they're going to ask you some good questions and be happy with the findings and understand what you did and what the results were. But a lot of times that's not the case as well. And they'll try to contest findings because maybe it's a PCI test, or maybe they needed to show a clean report to some company that was acquiring them, and it looks bad on them that they have all of these bad issues, so they want them out of the report. So this is where things get a little hairy, because one, they paid you to give a pen test and give them a report, so they feel like you should be able to change it and remove things. But at the other hand, you did the test and you need to show the actual results of the test, so you can't be removing things from the report. At this point, the best way to handle that is just tell them, okay, no problem. We can do remediation testing and we'll help you out and give you some suggestions on how to remediate it. And then we can give you an updated report that shows that all of these issues were fixed. And then you can give those to the people that are evaluating your company. However, they still might not like this because they're going to want a blank report. But it is what it is, because at the end of the day, you are a third-party assessment company that is objective, and you were hired because of that, because you're actually going to report the issues and not push anything under a rug. So remember your purpose and remember why you're there. You're there to help the company find issues that would impact them negatively so that they can fix them. You're not there to help them look pretty to their board of executives. You want to do your best to help them out and to remediate them, but you don't want to hide anything. You don't want to remove things from the report if they're legitimate. You just want to help them move forward in fixing them, and then help them understand why those are issues so that their developers in the future or their network architects know the proper way to go about things. So that's the way to think about it, and the way to structure it is that you're not just going to remove things, you're going to help them fix them. And the fact that you are a third-party auditor or a third-party penetration tester, these items have to stay. You were hired because of that. And that's why there are those rules and regulations with PCI and everything else, is because a third-party person who has no ties to the company and is not going to hide anything is doing the test for them. So these are things to understand with the findings, because a lot of times you'll get people who, they didn't want you to find anything and they're going to get mad. But then on the very other end of the spectrum, you may actually test something and the developers were really security conscious. They, use frameworks, they used all the security controls, they did the configurations correct, and you really just didn't find anything notable within their business logic or within, OWASP top 10, et cetera, and they're mad because they expected you to find 0 days and everything else, but it just wasn't there, or it wasn't, you weren't able to find it within the 40 hours you were allotted to test this application. You might not have had access to the code to do some code audits on things you wouldn't have found dynamically, or maybe, their code was actually just really good and there was no issues there. So they can get mad at you for that, but simply got to explain to them, like, look, you guys did a good job. And if you look through the report, it will state in very, many places all the things that we tried, because within those storyboards, as we talked about last time, you're going to detail a lot of your attempts, whether they were, successful or not. And it's going to show them a lot of the things you tried based on their application's business logic, based on their functionality. So you can show them that you tested all these things and it should, stop the issue. Now, another thing that'll pop up is maybe they know about an issue, but it's some weird issue that you didn't find because maybe it's buried really deep within these menu systems, or it's something that you have to do something very, very specific to be able to find it, but they know about it because they coded it, or maybe it came in through some bug bounty program. And so they'll get mad at you because you didn't find this issue in, a 3 or a 5 day test, when they had a bug bounty going for like 6 months and one person found it, right? And this is another thing where you got to explain to them the purpose of having a penetration test, even year by year, with a different company or a different tester within that company, and then having your bug crowd stuff on top of that, is that it's kind of like that whole defense in depth thing, is that each penetration tester has slightly different methodologies. They're cued into specific things based on their background. Were they a PHP developer? Were they a Ruby developer? Are they purely pen test? Did they come from, a source code review background or not? Like, depending on their background, they're going to be more valuable in certain situations than other, and the findings that they find may or may not overlap, which is why you get these tests every single year, and you do multiple things like your bug bounties, your penetration tests, your source code reviews, and you hope when all of that is done that 99% of the vulnerabilities are out of the application, other than something buried really deep somewhere that nobody would ever really find, or may just be harmless and benign vulnerability that you can't exploit. And that's basically what you hope. But you are going to have that happen where they're going to challenge you based on something that they know about. And I've had this, I've been on calls before, and it's just something that you got to explain to them. Like, everybody has a different background within penetration testing, and it's just going to happen. It is the way it is. Another thing that happens within these calls are during the initial kickoff call, you ask them a bunch of questions and maybe you keyed into some things they were saying and they were saying, oh, well, you'd never be able to do this because we do this. And of course you go look at it because, they brought it up and you find out you can do exactly what they told you couldn't. So when you get to the actual closeout call and you present the evidence of what you did and your process, your methodology, and how you got to where you did, they'll directly challenge you and say that it is impossible for you to do what you said you did, even though you're presenting them with data and screenshots and methodology of exactly what you did. They refuse to believe it. So this is something that will happen. And again, you just gotta smile and then explain to them how you did it in the simplest way possible and, why it was an issue. Maybe you figured out the configuration or what they kind of misconfigured for you to be able to do that, and explain it to them in the nicest way possible to not ruffle any feathers, but it's going to ruffle some feathers, so just kind of know that. There are a lot of things with these closeout calls that you have to be prepared for. And, I'm not saying every closeout call is going to be like this. 80 to 90% of your closeout calls are going to go pretty smoothly, but there are a lot of things that pop up. The craziest thing that I heard recently was somebody I know did a penetration test, and it was a 3-day test. And they didn't have a ton of findings, but they did, get DA, etc. But then the client was like, well, why didn't you try this Russian malware that just came out on our environment? We figured you'd be trying all the newest things. And we just kind of, my buddy just kind of looked at him and was like, we don't use Russian malware on clients because, that's really bad. And they just couldn't really understand the pen test methodology. So within your kickoff calls, one thing you got to really stress to them and go over with them if they're new to penetration testing, because this was this client's first penetration test, you need to explain to them the methodology, whether you're doing a full red team engagement or whether you're doing a penetration test or whether you're doing a vulnerability scan, etc. They need to understand what you're doing. So when you get to the closeout call, this doesn't become an issue where they're asking you why you didn't completely ravage their systems with Russian malware. So that's another crazy one I've heard recently. The next item that I hear a lot is, well, we can't fix this the industry standard way because of XYZ reason. And can we just not fix it and do a business justification? Or can we just throw a web application firewall or an IPS in front of it? And the answer is you can do whatever you want. However, know that if you don't fix it properly, it may have issues. If you put a web application firewall in front of it and somebody has a bypass to that web application firewall's rule sets, then they can exploit your program. If your IPS does not have, rules in there that catch what that network attack is, then it's going to be bypassed and it's still going to be exploited. So you're setting yourself up for failure. So the best thing to do is find out the best way you can actually fix that properly, rather than just putting band-aids on things. Now, you can also tell them too, you guys can do a business justification for whatever you want. Just understand that that's your internal business justification. We're not going to change it in the report. We're going to still report the finding. Whatever you do internally is on you, but you should really think about, what is a vulnerability and what is the impact? Because if the impact is something like it's a public website like a storefront and the passwords are short and there's no credit card information stored in there, it's just like shopping carts or something like that, like non-sensitive data, then sure, you can do a business justification that weak passwords are not a huge deal. We're not going to fix it because it's going to affect our customer relations in some way, right? But if it's something that is going to directly allow you to bypass and exploit things and gain access to things and sensitive data, you really shouldn't make a business justification for it. Now, you can do whatever you want within your internal corporation, but remember, that's on you. We're here as a third party to actually show you what the vulnerabilities are and help you fix them, not to push things under the rug. So these are conversations that you're going to end up having with clients on calls. And I just wanted you to think about all of these things and what your responses would be and what your stances are on these things, so you can convey them to your clients when you're on this kickoff call in the best way possible to help lead them to the best options for fixing things, or understanding what you did, or understanding the processes and methodologies if they're a little confused on this. Because your job is really just to help them fix their security issues and lead them down a good path that helps them set themselves up for success in the future. So hopefully this video is useful for you on all the issues that can pop up when you're on a closeout call. And again, it's not always going to be crazy like this, but it's just something that you got to think about. All these things that can pop up and all the issues you have to deal with and how you should deal with them, so that you're not just surprised all of a sudden about what happened. To close this out, thank you for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel if you want to watch any more videos, and hit the like button below. I definitely appreciate it, and it helps with the YouTube algorithm. Thank you.